Hey, what's going on, guys? Xiangqi PGN here. In this video, we're going to establish the proof of concept UDP client server interaction using Python programming language. And this is the part of my project on creating a server to play the game of Chinese chess CNC in a multiplayer mode. So, like in international Western chess, like Lichess, chess.com, and other monsters like that. But not that, but not with all of those bells and whistles. Instead, I'll try to make. I'm trying to make here a proof of concept, bare minimum implementation for this sort of a multiplayer. But anyway, as far as I want to keep these tutorials free from Chinese chess as much as possible, because not really many people love that in comparison to me. But so anyway, I'll try to make them reusable for people who just want to get the concepts of the multiplayer itself without getting bothered by the particular application of this knowledge. Another little note before we start coding is that I'm quite pretty new to the networking. Basically, I have a very poor experience with that. But so this shouldn't be treated as a tutorial, like as if I was teaching you something, but instead this should be treated as I'm just showcasing my learning path. So where I start from, where I start from, and where eventually I'm gonna be along this path, basically. So okay, enough lyrics. So without further ado, let's actually start writing some code. So in this video, we'll create two files. So the first one would be called the UDP. Well, it's actually, as far as I have the folder UDP, I think I can just call it server.py. Well, let's actually call it UDP server to make sure that this is the UDP server. So UDP server.py, and here that would be a test client. So let's call it UDP test client .py. Okay, so I'm just wondering. Okay, it's better probably call it just UDP client. I mean, I'm gonna be using this client code in the Flask web application later on, not in this tutorial, obviously, but anyway. So this file would be used just as a proof of concept to make a request to the UDP server, nothing much. Okay, so let's start. So here we'll have a UDP server. Okay, so we want to import some packages. So actually we only need to import, well, at the moment we only need to import the socket, which is the standard Python module. So then we need to define IP and port. So IP would be the local host, as far as I'm running this locally. Even if I will run this on Python anywhere one day, still the local host is still on the cards, I believe. Okay, and the port number, I would be using the port 8888. Okay, so the next thing to consider, we need to create a server side socket. Okay, so I just call it server socket, and it would be equal to socket.socket and socket.af-inet, just the standard lines to initialize the socket. And the second argument is socket.sock dgram diagram. Okay, so the next thing to consider, we need to bind server side socket to IP and port. So we can simply say server socket dot bind, and it takes a tuple as an argument, so we need the IP and the port. In Python, it's way more high level than in C, and it's really pleasant to work with. Finally, we want to close socket, and I actually we probably we won't be even getting here, but still, just to make things a little bit more clear. So socket.close, and here the main loop would be to want to listen to incoming requests. So just make it within the infinite loop. I know not the best practice ever, but we have a proof of concept implementation here, so this should be literally enough. So we need to receive the data and the credentials, basically. So credentials, and this would be equal to server side, server socket dot we want to receive from, and now I need to specify the number of bytes to receive. So I'll use this constant number. Well, probably we could let's say bytes to receive, let's say bytes chunk. I think this would be the case. So bytes would be equal to 124. This is more than enough in our case, and I just want to receive the bytes here. And eventually I want to print server received and the data and the credentials. Copy and paste, save. And if I did everything correctly, this should be already enough to start the server. So if I just say Python 3, I call it UDP server, UDP server.py. Okay, and it seems like the server is already listening, so which is very good then. Okay, and now let's implement the client. So I want to copy this part. Well, actually, bytes are also on the cards because later on we would be listening for the response back. Okay, and let's go here. So here we'll have the UDP client already. So all this stuff is the same. Now we want to initialize client socket, client side socket. So let's call it client socket equals, well, actually, hold on a sec, I can reuse the code, right? Can reuse the code here. And now just as a proof of concept, I want to send message to UDP server, and I can simply say client server dot send to, and now the message itself, this should be bytes. Here we can say like request from client, and here we need to specify the IP and the port, so it's quite pretty important. And then we would be taking the response from the server itself, and eventually I also need to close the client socket dot close client socket. Okay, so if I did everything correctly, now it should be enough to establish this sort of a proof of concept interaction. So here is our server listening to the port 8888 at localhost, and here Python 3, I call it UDP client, UDP client dot py. Okay, so here it is. So we have server received, and this is the bytes the server has received, request from client. So here is the IP and here is the port. In order to actually send the response to the client back, we need to use these credentials. Okay, and actually later on, when it would be about actually sending moves between one player and another player, we would be pre-storing these credentials and waiting for the response, and so to make sure that we send in the move to not to like say send the response from move from client 1 to client 2 and move from client 2 to client 1, and not like here we'll make like there would be the single client, and it would be taking the response, like client sends a response and this exact client gets response. But later on, to make this interaction while moves, we'll obviously need to specify and pre-store the client we're supposed to be sending the move to. But for now, I just want to show this proof of concept, like how to use the credentials to send the message to a particular client, so to make sure that we're sending this to the exact client that has sent the message to the server. Okay, so server can still be, no, server should be stopped. So I use Control-C to stop the server and free the port 8888 in this case. And let's now do the following stuff. So here we actually receive the receive request from client, and here we want to send response to client as well. Okay, so I think this is it. I just thought that when I would be working on this code later on, the code would probably change significantly. But on the other hand, yeah, I think the video is enough just to see this code, how it works. Yeah, okay, so send response to client, and here I want to say server socket dot send to, and so here we say server response, so to give to give the client the idea that this is the server response actually. And well, I think so hold on a sec, just okay, so it has, okay, here it is. So yeah, I just can take the, maybe I just can use these credentials directly. Yeah, I think I can use these credentials directly, because this is the tuple already. Yeah, this is the tuple already. Yeah, let's see whether it works. And here I want to, on the client side, I want to receive response from server. Okay, so data credentials, so here we use the client socket receive from bytes. So yeah, this should be the case. And now just print so server response and data and credentials as well. Save. Okay, so let's try again. So I started the server again, and now I run the client. Okay, seems it's working. So what happens? So we're sending the request from the client to the server. Server receives this request from client and the credentials, and then server sends the request back, sends the response back. So here we see the server response. This is this server response is just a print statement within the client. This one is the actual message. So yeah, just to make it a bit even a bit more clear, let's call this one a message. Let's call it a message, and here also the message, and here also want to print send response to client, and the credentials. Okay, so starting the server again and running the client. Okay, so we have the message request from client, the credentials. Now we send in the response to the client, and here on the client side we have the message from the server, and we have the server response, which is the message the server sent us, and also the credentials of the server itself. So it's quite pretty simple. That's kind of literally it. Okay, guys, so this is it regarding the proof of concept interaction between the UDP client and server. And in the next video, we would be trying to actually send moves, like from side one, like from player one to the server, then from the server to player two, from player two to the server back, and back to the player one. I'm not sure how exactly I'm supposed to be doing that because I've never been doing that before, but I hope that would be fun. Well, anyway, I'm gonna be using the Python Flask app as the middleware to interact with it, as a middleware to between the browser and the UDP server. So I would be inputting the moves from the browser. At first I just would be using the browser's kind of like address line. Yeah. So then the client, then the HTTP server would be receiving that on the specific route, and then redirecting this response to the server. So we'll see how it works. Basically, this is gonna be interesting to play around with. Okay, guys. So this is it from my side. I hope to see you in the next videos within this tutorial series on. Not the tutorial series with this within this journey of how PGN is trying to implement his very first multiplayer game of Chinese chess. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Okay, guys, thanks for watching. This is it from my side. Until the next time, and take care.